Made a trip to Alaska and decided to do a cruise tour this year. Just for a brief history of Alaska, Alaska was populated by the Indians, the Eskimos, and the Alouette people before the European exploration. In the 1740s, Alaska had been explored and claimed by the Russian fur traders. By 1860, Russia started having financial problems, and in 1867 they decided to sell Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million. But that was really a bargain because that goes down to 2 cents per acre. Today, an acre in Juneau is $80,000. Now, Alaska was a remote, frozen land that very few explored. Alaska has over 500 glaciers, and salmon fishing and the gold rush of the late 1800s brought people and prosperity to Alaska. Alaska became the 49th state on January the 3rd, 1959. It is 2 times the size of Texas, but it ranks only 49th in population. 15% of the inhabitants are native Indians, of which the Athabascan are mostly in the interior. Now, to look at our pictures, on a Friday we made this trip with Jedediah's brother and his wife, Jean and Judy. We decided to do a cruise tour. That meant that we cruised for 3 days, and we did a land tour of Alaska for 6 days. We were very pleased with all of our accommodations. We flew from Atlanta to Los Angeles to Vancouver and had a relaxing night in Vancouver. On Saturday, we rode the shuttle bus to the airport, boarded a transfer bus which took us to Canada Place. Now, Canada Place is the cruise ship terminal in Vancouver. We cruised with Holland American Lines, and our ship was the Zuiderdam. When we got on the ship, we were told that lunch was ready, but our rooms were not. So we ate and then took a tour of the ship. We were on the 7th floor, so we had a lot of staircases. We had good elevators, but they were usually filled with people, and we got our exercise on the staircases. This is a fountain that's in the spa area. This is a seating area at one of the eateries on one of the decks. The atrium. You can always do shopping. This is a jewelry shop here, and even had a discount of 40% off. This map of the world was always lit where we were. This lit section is the inside passage that the ship was going to be cruising, but anytime you could go up to this map and see exactly where we were on the ship. The screening room had full-length movies that we enjoyed seeing. And this is the elevator on the floor that we stayed on. The theater had shows and informational meetings. The decks were spacious and very comfortable, and the sunshine felt good in that cool air. We had a safety briefing on what we would do if there was an emergency and where we would go. We were assigned to Section 14 and learned how to use our life jackets. We left Vancouver about 5 o'clock. The ship hosted a barbecue, outdoor barbecue. They did the grilling out there, complete with a band. But we chose not to eat then. We decided to wait and eat in the restaurant that night. We had Faisal, who was our waiter, and he treated us royally and entertained us all also. We tried to get his table the other nights, but he was booked up. On Sunday, after leisurely breakfast, Judy and I went on to the Edible Creations demonstration. The chefs were showing their sculptor ability. This is a swan made out of squash, honeydew, and watermelon. A mouse made out of cantaloupe, and his eyes are kiwi and carrots and blueberries and a strawberry nose. A watermelon, the whole front had been carved as a rose. The cauliflower puppy with carrots and strawberries. The eggplant penguin with carrots feet. And these flowers are onions and radishes and beets and carrots. And the vase is a pineapple. After that, we took a galley tour, and they had the ability to fold napkins different ways. One of the many huge kitchens. This is a sculpture they'd made out of white chocolate for the white chocolate midnight buffet, and the castle was very ornate. This is the chocolate dragon. Then two of the chefs came and did one of their recipes for us. It was a halibut recipe. I have not tried it, but that night we had it in the restaurant and it was delicious. After lunch we went on a lecture on Alaska's early explorers. Orchids were throughout the ship. They were on all the tables in the dining areas and the buffet area and also the main dining room, and they decorated throughout the ship. Judy and I went to Royal High Tea that day, and you can see the watermelon that was carved previously, and we had a lot of little finger foods and delicious teas, and this is another flower arrangement. All very delicious. We also went to the screening room to watch a movie before we went to dinner that night, and it was formal night, and that just meant we shouldn't wear t-shirts or shorts to the dining room. We had a pretty ice sculpture, and we were seated right next to the water, so it was a beautiful evening. That night we entered Alaskan waters, and our time changed back 1 hour. Now we were 4 hours behind home. Monday, after an early breakfast, we went to the top deck to see some beautiful snow-capped mountains. We were looking for whales also, and we did capture some on our videos. We were to cruise past Tracy Arm, which is a huge glacier. As we got closer to the glacier, we saw a small boat come to the cruise ship, and about 50 people got on. We found out that they went up to the glacier and then met us in Juneau, but we did not get to cruise up to the glacier like we had thought we would. But we did get to see some really pretty scenery and glacier chunks. That afternoon, Judy and I went to a flower arranging demonstration before lunch, and lunch that evening was an Alaskan cookout. The flower demonstration we had was very good, and we got to see the final product. This was on Monday, and we got to go to the town of Juneau. That was our first port of call. Alaska has a capital named Juneau, and Juneau cannot be reached except by plane or by boat. It is the capital. 30,000 people live there today. It is known for its gold, government, beautiful glaciers, and stunning views of water and mountains. We rode a train to the top of Mount Roberts, a tram rather, and this gave us a bird's eye view of the town of Juneau, and you can see our ship in the top center corner. And this is the town of Juneau from up at Mount Roberts. It was also the first time I had had cell coverage to call home. Gene is a Vietnam vet, and he met up with a fellow vet. And there was a lot of nature trails up there at the top of the mountain, and they caution you to let someone know you're on the trails because there are a lot of bears up there also. There's a wilderness nature center there, and this is a bald eagle that had been shot in the eye and been rescued by the center and was being cared for. We went into the auditorium and saw a movie on the settlement of Juneau, and a local family performed several songs and narratives for us. We went back to the ship that evening for dinner and enjoyed listening to a strings quartet. Later, there was a lecture on the gold rush days, and that was to get us ready for our land tour the next day. On Tuesday, we had a very early breakfast because this was the day we were to leave our ship in Skagway and begin our land tour. They said we had had our vacation, now we were beginning our adventure. We met our tour director and group in the entertainment lounge. We had an Alaskan park ranger to give us information of Alaska. We were greeted by the moose in Skagway, left the ship, and were free to explore Skagway for 3 hours. In the late 1800s, gold was found in various places in Alaska and in the Klondike region of Canada's Yukon Territory. Skagway was the gateway to the gold fields for the thousands who flocked to Alaska and the Klondike region with the hope of striking it rich. From Skagway to the gold fields was 500 miles over the treacherous White Pass above Skagway. Then they crossed the Canadian border to Lake Bennett. There the stampeders built barges and floated down the Yukon River to the gold fields around Dawson City. Less than half who left Skagway made it to Dawson City. Crossing the pass was so treacherous that the White Pass and Yukon Railroad began construction of its railroad in May of 1898. It was completed in the summer of 1890, but the gold rush was over by then. We enjoyed walking the streets of Skagway and getting a feel of the gold rush days. One of the rangers took us on a guided tour. This is the Bank of Alaska. It is a working bank even today, but when you walk in, it's like going back in time with all of the different equipment that it's got in it. This is a typical street front in Skagway. This snowplow is actually used nowadays to get snow off of the tracks when the train needs to get across and the snow is too deep for just the train to cross. This is our engine. We boarded the White Pass Railroad and started on our path, which was the same path that the Stampeders took when they were seeking to get rich with gold. This is some of the scenery along the way. Of course, our trip was much more comfortable than they had it. We had a ranger on the car with us who gave us information, narrated the whole trip for us. We passed over this trestle. Even though it looks not mighty tenuous, it was very durable for us. Our trip was not near as rugged as the Stampeders Trail. This was part of the trail that they had to cross. And here's a Northwest Mounted Police cabin that had been used in years past. We were on the train about an hour and a half and it arrived in Fraser in Canada. We boarded our motor coach and changed our watches up 1 hour because we were in Canada, as I said. Our tour bus was very roomy and comfortable. This was the first time that our tour had been together without other people. It turned out that we were a very congenial group and had a great time together. We continued seeing beautiful scenery along the way. Our bus driver enjoyed giving us bits of information, and our tour director was always conscious of our needs. We stopped in Carcross, Yukon Territory, and you can see the gold rush influence even today. Those gold pans are taller than I am. Carcross stands for Caribou Crossing. It was an important settlement for the railroad construction workers. At the general store, I wanted to get my passport stamped, but the place was closed. Our big orange motor coach was always ready for us to get back on and very comfortable. As we were riding that day, we saw our first black bear on the side of the road. We spent the night in Whitehorse, which is the capital of the Yukon Territory and home of the SS Klondike. On Wednesday, we left Whitehorse about 8 o'clock to travel 300 miles along the Alaskan Highway. About 30 minutes into our trip, we stopped at Uncommon Journeys, which is a dog sled kennel, and the owners of the complex live here. We were given a narrative of the dogs that pull sleds and how important they are to their owners. Their dogs are retired racing dogs, and they are trained to run and are happiest when they do. They are so fit that they have more endurance on the last day of a race than they did on the first. The dogs establish a hierarchy among themselves. This is also the scene of the kennels. The dogs are all tied to their houses and very docile when told to be quiet. This is Cola. She's the smallest female in the whole kennel, but she runs the whole kennel. We got to walk among the dogs and get acquainted with them. Each of them have their name on their little house. This company offers adventure trips in the summer and in the winter with these sleds. They did a demonstration of 6 dogs pulling an all-terrain vehicle. The dogs are very powerful when they know that they're going to pull something. Sled dogs were used in the early days to deliver mail, goods, medicine, and to get to places in the wintertime. They are still used in the wintertime now to get to remote areas and are really the only means of getting around. The Alaskan Husky is the choice of today's racers, and that dog has been developed from a number of breeds. We got on the bus for a couple of hours and saw a grizzly playing on the side of the road.